Owen, you broke your back playing college basketball, pivoted to professional Fortnite, and led a robotics project for Boeing. Today, at 26, you're scaling software companies and pulling in 75K a month. I'm curious, do you credit your success to gifted genetics or your relentless work ethic?
I credit my success, what early success I have had, to honestly my brother. My brother has autism and Down syndrome. And so from a young age, my experience was win or lose, I was very fortunate to try, to be able to compete and do these things. So I felt like I had a gift of just being able to go out there and do things. And I don't think other people realize how fortunate they are to just be breathing and being able to talk. Like, to me, it's an absolute blessing to be here, to have this conversation with you guys when, many people don't get to do that anymore. And even if you did have the blessing of doing that, we're in our 20s, like, things are very good for us either way. And, one day, 10, 20 years from now, maybe that's not the case. So I felt like I always credit my success to my brother and, just a feeling of gratitude. So win or lose, I was relatively happy and I could just go back the next day and not get too high or too low.
I want to take it back to a very critical moment in your life when you were playing junior basketball and you broke your back. Can you walk us through that experience and how that grew you?
Yeah, I was one of those guys that I put all my eggs in one basket, and junior college basketball was supposed to be a stepping stone for me to maybe go, high major D1 potentially. I'm a 6 foot, 185 pound white guy. So it wasn't like I had like all the
Same.
ability in the world. Right. But that's what I wanted to do. So I went to junior college and I went up for a dunk to like impress the coaches or something. And I felt like a slight tweak in my back. Like, we all kind of have tweaked our backs, and it got progressively worse the next few weeks. And I got an MRI and it was an L5 pars defect, which is like a hairline fracture in your lower back. And as soon as I got that MRI and it came back positive, and I knew for 6 months to a year I would be essentially bedridden, no activity. This is early 2018, maybe late 2017. I think it was late 2017. I went out and bought a computer and started playing Fortnite. It had just came out, and that was something else that I wanted to do. So in the back of my mind, I was like, I bet I could be a pro gamer because I was always good at it growing up. So as soon as that happened, I got the green light, went out the next day, bought a computer, and started doing that 12 hours a day.
Yeah, that's so interesting, man. That's wild. What a wild moment that would have been. I couldn't imagine breaking my back playing basketball.
Fortunately, it wasn't that extreme.
Gotcha.
It was a hairline fracture. I'm pretty healthy now. I don't think about it ever. It wasn't something that really set me back forever.
Yeah, interesting. Let's go a little deeper into that specific moment, though, because obviously it sounds like you were pretty motivated playing basketball and wanting to continue, whether that's D1 or go pro with time. Let's go a little deeper into that specific moment when you maybe we're in the doctor's office, you got the news, and you're like, oh shit, okay, I guess I'm going to have to pivot and try Fortnite now.
Yeah, I think I had prepped myself. I sometimes do this where I think like, what's the worst case scenario that comes out of this? And I had already started playing Fortnite. It had launched like 2 or 3 months earlier, the Battle Royale version. And I had played it a little bit. I loved it. I was good at it. I knew it was early and a new style of game, meaning who was going to win was whoever was compounding the most hours for the longest time, like right at launch. Because like the skill gap, quickly you could get to the best players because there's not that many people that were really putting in the time, versus now it's almost impossible to go pro. So I knew in the back of my mind, like, okay, if this is positive and I am going to be out, this is kind of good news. I can, jump into this new thing right away, which, was kind of always something I wanted to do.
Do you think by always asking what's the worst case scenario, this kind of preps you to go whatever direction you need to go in life? Like with
Yes.
you breaking your back?
Yes. I don't want to be a doomer, essentially, and, look at things with a very negative mindset. But I think it's important to understand the most likely scenarios or the range of them, and are you okay with them? So for instance, if you were going to start a project, for instance, first app that I launched was a Bible app. I thought, okay, if this fails, am I okay with that? Am I okay with losing money here? All of those different things, and or maybe putting my name to something that does fail and that looks bad socially. And the app really didn't do well. It kind of failed, but I did learn a lot, and I was okay with that outcome. And it helped me kind of realign to back to the content space. So yeah, I think it's important to, when you're looking at all the potential outcomes, are you okay with the worst case one? If so, then proceed.
Sorry for interrupting. Really quickly, I have a favor to ask though. 97% of you aren't actually subscribed to the podcast who listen on a regular basis. It's completely free to do so, and it really helps us continue to grow, improve our production, and ultimately get on bigger guests with time. So if you're enjoying the show today, please hit the subscribe button. It helps us out more than you know. And let's get back into the episode. I want to talk a little bit more about your brother, Eric. I'm curious how, maybe more in detail, how he's, shaped your perception of life and maybe doing something like having something so devastating, like hurting yourself in basketball, the sport you love, but knowing that it's okay. Maybe it is good news. Has he kind of influenced that mindset, do you think?
Yeah, my brother is the best. He's probably had 40 plus surgeries, all the GI, gastrointestinal, like full body type things that have just been terrible to watch, basically. Fortunately now he's 32. He's in a good place at a group home in St. Augustine in Florida. And, everything is good. But I remember growing up, and one of the things that influenced me most was having a bad game and pouting, like Little League or something, like 7 years old. And my dad, was like, really? Like, you're going to pout? Like, look at your brother. And, when I was young, it was super easy to pout. And, obviously I still do, right? Like, we're very human. But it at least gave me some perspective that, like, you do have it good. A bad game is not the actual end of the world. Just learn from it, get better, keep going.
Yeah, really interesting. Is Eric your biggest motivator in life to keep you going?
Yeah, for probably a couple reasons. I mean, he's going to be expensive. Like, I do have to provide. So I knew that at a young age. I had a good upbringing, but we didn't come from like a ton of money. So I knew I would have to put things together. And I knew also there were very few jobs that I could get that would probably make it make sense in terms of getting my kids' tuition ready, paying for anything that I want or my family needs, and then also taking care of Eric and making sure that, he's going to be taken care of. Obviously, having him in a group home, those surgeries, there's a lot of costs there. So yeah, I mean, he's been a huge motivator pretty much all the way around.
Have you felt that obligation and pressure from a young age that you were going to take care of Eric, or how did that come about?
I did. I think I just saw the writing on the wall that, my mom, she worked a little bit, but taking care of Eric was kind of a full-time job. And then, my dad was in sales. He kind of made a little bit of money here and there. I kind of just assumed that I would have to do more to make sure he's good. So I felt, I don't know if it was like pressure, but it was just like what I should do. I think probably a lot of guys feel that way, just like, I'm going to have to step up.
Yeah, you'd think a lot of people do, but I think we'd be surprised. I know everyone in this podcast right now definitely feels that pressure, but I think maybe some people, maybe everybody does, and they just choose not to act on it and just kind of carry on the normal way. But how did you deal with that pressure early on? If you felt it at a young age, was it hard to deal with it all, or just natural, like that was life for you?
Yeah, I don't think I definitely wasn't negative about it. I think, I read Meditations in high school, I think, by Marcus Aurelius, his like personal journal and notes. And he said something along the lines of, in the morning, the birds and the bees, they get up, like that's just what it is. And so I think it's kind of the same thing. If you zoom out a little bit, this is just what you do. Like you get to work, you do things, maybe you don't want to do them, but, you just kind of do them all the time. And that's just what it is. That's just life.
Looking back, obviously Eric has been a big impact in your life. Has there been anyone else in your family or friends that's really impacted your youth and young adult?
100%. My parents specifically had huge impacts. For instance, my mom, working a job, me and her with Eric a lot, like my parents were split. She was such a hard worker, like very fierce. Taking care of my brother was a very, very tough job. So I had a ton of respect for her. And that was kind of the lens I grew up with, that, like women were superheroes kind of thing. Cause that was like the only one I like really knew. I didn't have sisters or anything. So that was cool to see, what I could expect from my potential future wife. Like, okay, she's got to be super hardworking, like fierce, like all these different things, but also being able to give and take care of someone and all that, like this huge range. And then on my dad's side, I never want to air out my dad. Like my dad and I have a good relationship now. But, candidly, I always thought he could, he had incredible potential, I guess we'll leave it at that. And so I didn't want to leave anything on the table with myself. I wanted to make sure that I was genuinely trying, and honestly swinging for the fences a little bit, not necessarily trying to just play it too safe. But yeah, I thought if I can make 300, 500K a year playing basketball plus like training or like writing books or whatever, like I knew there was money from chasing like the extreme outcome versus playing it more safe. So yeah, probably leave it at that.
I don't want to pry too much on your family stuff. Of course, that's your business, but I'm curious, you saw your dad and you thought maybe he could have pushed harder and you didn't want to do that. And yet most people see what their parents are doing and emulate it. If they see their dad not pushing very hard, they probably aren't going to push that hard in life. So why did you? Was it because of your single mother?
Yeah, I think it probably was. I think there's something to be said. I really do think a lot of how we are made is just early childhood. Things that we can't necessarily control. That's why I'm a believer in God. I don't think I made these decisions or I'm self-made or like any of these things. If God hadn't constricted or, built my life in a certain way or introduced me to things how they happened, then I just wouldn't be the person I am. So I think it's one of those things where, that was just kind of the environment that I grew up in, and it kind of put me down this path. And now I love it. Like, the things I do day to day now, I would not change them at all. Which is, working on the product, like our software stuff with our team, working with all the creators that we have, and, staying in good shape, doing stuff like that as well.
Why do you think it is some people don't live up to their potential? Like if you could see in your dad so much that he was living below his means or what was possible, why do you think that is?
There's this concept called region beta paradox. You guys know that?
No,
never heard of it.
Basically, I'm going to absolutely butcher this, but I understand the concept in my brain. Definitely look it up after. Someone will explain it better. But there's this idea where, if someone is comfortable in what they have, then they're not going to be forced to change into like the best possible outcome. So I think, the honest truth is my dad grew up in Southern California, went to University of Boulder, had a degree, was making money. Technically his day-to-day life wasn't all that different from maybe some of his friends that were running companies that, are worth like tens of millions of dollars. Technically they hung out at the same places, ate the same food. You know what I mean? And so he didn't really feel extreme pain or pressure to change. So this idea of the region beta paradox is, if things actually got worse for him, then he would have been forced to change and would have had a better outcome. Example of this would be maybe, to go you think in your brain, okay, if I have to go less than a mile, I'm going to walk it. But if you have to go, 1.1 miles, you're going to drive. So if you would have just like, it'll take you 20 minutes to walk like that 0.8 miles or whatever. And to drive it'll take you 2 minutes. You should probably drive like way more. You know what I mean? Like you should do what's faster way more, but people just walk, I guess. Again, I'm trying to explain it best I can, but it's this idea kind of like a comfort zone thing. I don't know if people get that significant push to do more. And this is true in all of us. I mean, I guess a really simple example for most people would be, have you ever gone through a breakup? You probably change because the pain is great. Whether that's, cleaning up after yourself or cleaning dishes more or working out more, starting the business, whatever it is, there's some sort of pain that needs to be hit. That threshold has to be filled for you to change.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I'm definitely going to have to look it up later. I've never heard of that before. Do you think that changing your environment is important to kind of solving that problem with the region beta paradox?
Yeah. I think you can put yourself in an environment that forces you to change. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it usually. Because, you don't want to like wait for things to happen. You want to put yourself in new environments or new places that force you to change.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think that forcing risk on yourself is important to that journey?
I think it's a great question. I have friends. I have a friend who has like the fastest growing activewear brand in the world right now, and he took out like a PayPal loan with crazy rates, which put a ton of pressure and stress on himself. And everyone was like, "You're an idiot," basically. But he ended up making it work, maybe because of that added pressure, and it could have been the best thing that he ever did. So, it's one of those things where if you have pressure and it forces and it makes you change your behavior, then potentially that is a good thing, even if people would disagree with it. And I think a lot of the advice that people give, like why people tell him not to do that, is because technically he could get better rates, or he would be safer or more comfortable. But this whole idea of risk is completely over exaggerated. For him, let's say worst case scenario, he doesn't pay back that loan or he goes bankrupt or whatever, he could still restart and have a very successful business 5 years from now with like higher risk tolerance. So it could be even better. So the whole idea of risk to me is our brains, it's like an evolutionary thing. Our brains have it programmed in us that risks exist so that we don't get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger or whatever. But it's not necessarily that real anymore. But that's how our brains treat it.
How did you feel about the pressure and risk after breaking your back in basketball and then trying to go pro in Fortnite?
Yeah. Thinking back to the beginning of this conversation, I was doing that thing of, okay, what's worst case scenario here? And for me, I was still going to go to school, get a degree, and I knew I'd be safe. So I knew I could pursue it. And I also knew I had people who loved me. I could go sleep on my mom's couch or something if I had to. So there was literally no downside. I felt like this was the best opportunity ever. Something I always wanted to do. And I think it was really good for me mentally. Like, it was a very, very challenging thing doing that 12, 15 hours a day. So yeah, I think it was great.
What's the biggest risk that you've ever taken in business or just your life?
That's a great question. Someone asked me this recently, and I don't really know. I don't know. I think, I left my job to do content full time. People would probably consider that a risk. I think maybe relationships were probably the bigger risk. Like, I've broken up with people, or, haven't ended relationships, I guess, with people that, a lot of people would say that would be a great person to marry. Like, you should probably stay with them. And they're right. Like, I do see that. But if we're not perfectly aligned, again, I do want to be very specific with the outcomes that I'm going after. Then maybe that's not the best person for me. But the risk there is I'm foregoing like a pretty good relationship in life that would maybe even be better than most people's in order to get like the actual outcome that I really want. In terms of doing things like leaving my job to do content full time, I guess you could consider that a risk. But the thing is, out of college, I was doing $60K a year. And then when I left that job, I was already doing like $10K a month from social media and content. So I basically doubled my salary. It didn't feel like much of a risk to me, even though they were contracts with brands. But I thought, okay, well, I already have great case studies. It's not like I'm starting from scratch here. I've already worked with Whoop and Kane Footwear and some companies like that, on top of making money just from posting on social media on TikTok. So I was like, this, I don't know. That to me doesn't feel like as big of a risk as the relationship stuff. Relationships to me, I think, are very, very risky, because the people you spend all your time with will shape your habits. We're all susceptible to that in our environments. So stepping away from maybe some of those was kind of risky.
One thing I've analyzed about you for the last 22 minutes is you're very intentional. And it seems like to you, it's riskier to stay in a job and make $60K a year than go out and try content creation and creating these apps. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. I definitely want to be intentional with everything I do. Part of that is, again, the specific outcomes that we're looking for. And part of that is, it doesn't sit right with me, with my gut or my instinct when I'm not doing these things. Steve Jobs has a quote, and it's intuition is more important than intellect. There's like another quote from, I forget, but it's basically courage is in shorter supply than genius. So being able to trust your gut, have courage is actually a moat in itself versus, doing the safe thing or what's maybe intellectually the safer move.
You said that kind of nervous gut feeling. Are you someone where if you sit on the couch for an hour and a half, you get anxious because you're not doing something?
For sure. But, I have my days where I will. I have I don't know if it's like an ADHD thing, but, if you don't have like a set timeline or something you have to go do, then you can kind of just sit there. Like a lot of people who, maybe they will do that most of the day, but then it'll get later in the day and that's when they say that they're creative. And it's because they have that like temporal landmark of having to go to bed that incentivizes them finally to, okay, now I got to get to work because I have to go to bed soon. So having like little things like that throughout the day that force you to get things done, I think is really, really helpful to avoid, feeling the dread of just sitting still in bed or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Something I've observed, it seems like you're a very logical person. Do you think that's the case, Owen?
I think I try to be,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I never felt like I was extremely intelligent. So what I try to do is, like logically go through problems or whatever, and listen to people that, are further ahead of me or have done things that I want to do, and then just try to reconcile the two and make good decisions. That was another thing my mom always told me when I was growing up, like, is that a good decision? Like, what are you doing? It's really helpful to kind of have that lens, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that it was naturally intuitive for you to just think about things logically, or was it your mom specifically that really influenced that thinking?
I think my mom treated me when I was a little kid, like 5 years old, like an adult in some sense, where she wasn't like trying to baby me or stuff like that. She would have conversations with me. I remember she wanted to go back to University of Southern California, get and finish up with either a degree or a license. I forget like what it was. And she sat me down and she's like, hey, like, if I want to make more money, this is kind of what I got to do. And I remember having that conversation with her as a little kid. And I was like, yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, you should do that. So I think, those are just the conversations I had. What do we have to do here? Think it out, think it through. At the same time, I also feel like I am extremely emotional as well. So I don't think I'm like, if you talk to people, you'd be like, yeah, this guy Owen cries at movies or whatever. Like, I'm super like, I have that aspect, or I can react irrationally or emotionally. So, the logical stuff is when I am in a good headspace and things are good, but sometimes things are bad and, emotions do get the best of us too. So just trying to, again, make those good decisions, keep moving forward, learn, keep going.
Right. And maybe that balance is quite natural and normal in the sense some people may be more rational or more emotional, but I'm sure everybody plays the fence at some point. But something really interesting, having these conversations with your mom at 5 years old, Owen, whether you realize it or not, people go to therapy over this stuff. And yet it seems to just be so normal for you and propelled you forward. And I'm wondering why, if you've even reconciled that sort of situation.
What do you mean?
Well, when kids are forced to grow up, really quickly in their life, it often can leave trauma and, they never got to be a kid. But for you, it sounds like you had to grow up at a really young age, with a single mother, and yet it doesn't seem to hold you back. It seems to have motivated you to move forward as opposed to be a crutch that you lean on.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great point. I think I did have a good childhood still. Like, I can remember, climbing on the school roof, hanging out with my friends, riding bikes after school, stuff like that were, more fun, more knucklehead behavior kind of thing. Yeah, I think I had both. So I think it was just a balance. I think that's a cop-out answer, but I guess I did grow up quickly, but, there are things that have to be done.
Right.
I just, again, I don't know if it's because of my brother or what specifically, but I feel very fortunate for, how things happened. In terms of using it as a crutch, I don't think that has any positive benefit. Or if you do use things as a crutch, it should be like, some sort of positive connotation to that, which I think I try to do with my brother. Like, I feel extremely lucky, really. Not like, oh, I got more work to do or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? It's a good question, though. It's really interesting.
You mentioned multiple times being grateful and leaving it kind of in the hands of God. Have you been religious your entire life?
Yeah. I got baptized when I was, again, like 8, 10, maybe 12 at Saddleback Church by Rick Warren himself, which is so funny because during high school, I was delivering food for a restaurant in SoCal. And I remember looking at a bag and it was like R. Warren was the name. And I went and dropped it off at his place and it was him. And I was like, he baptized me. He's a famous pastor and author. But yeah, I always wanted to go to, I never went to like the kids section of church. I always enjoyed going and listening to the hymns speak, or Mike Fabarez was our pastor at Compass Bible Church in SoCal. And I felt like, that was where you could learn more. I didn't want to have to do activities and stuff. To me, it was like, okay, let's go to church. Let's learn from the best here kind of thing. And yeah, my mom would be like, are you sure? Like, you don't want to go to that? Or, like, your friends are there? And I was like, I'm not going to enjoy it. So I think I enjoyed learning. Again, I've like kind of read the Bible, like gone through the whole thing, but like not perfectly, I suppose. I've done the daily Bible reading for a year and like stuff like that. But after I got baptized, I was going to church. My dad is a Lutheran, so I was with him some weekends, and then my mom was evangelical Christian on other weekends. So I kind of got to see different styles of church and teachings, and I really enjoyed learning and having good messages. And again, the way things happen in my life, that's why I felt like I was Christian. Just because, for instance, my brother would sit in the dugout. There was really cool Little League coaches that would bring him in. And so all these kids had the same thing. And people were like, atheists or whoever tried to like, get me or gotcha me. And they'll say like, if God is so great, why does your brother have autism and Down syndrome and he struggles? And the effect that my brother has had on all these other people in my life that I've been able to see, those second and third order effects of how, they become more grateful, more happy. I think like 2 or 3 people from that I grew up with are now speech and language pathologists that work with kids with Down syndrome and teach it. And now they have a huge impact. So I think that's how God works. I've felt like ever since I was a little kid, that was my belief system. And then when my mom during high school, during college, when I was playing junior college basketball, she moved to South Carolina. And, her one wish for me was make sure you still go to church. So I would just go by myself. I did that in college. I would go by myself. I moved to Tampa after college, would go by myself. Now I go with people or friends or whatever, but I did, throughout this whole period too, but it just felt important to me, to make sure I go and spend that time every week.
Do you think God has influenced your positive outlook on the world and life?
Yeah, I think he has. But I think, we are humans and we like to think of ourselves as smart and intellectual and all of that, but there's just billions of us. And, I think we are his creation, and, his overarching plan is working in ways that we just cannot see, or we're not omniscient. We're not able to see and understand things at, all these different levels like a creator could. So I believe so, but maybe for other people, they don't feel that way, but it's part of like God's overall plan for all of us.
Has being religious also helped you take these risks in life, from going from content to building these apps, because it's part of God's plan?
Yeah, I think that is 100% a part of it, because this life, like my brother, It's not perfect. It's full of pain and ups and downs and sadness, but it's also not eternal. It is, a very small, finite amount of time that we spend here. And that definitely, again, allows me to have great risk, because I know, ultimately we have eternity somewhere else in a more perfect place.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I want to go a little bit deeper into your journey because obviously, you played junior college basketball. You went to go try to be professional in Fortnite, had some success there. You did the robotics thing as well. And yet when you graduated university, you took a traditional path and got a job. So I'm curious what the decision was at that point, finding success with multiple paths and yet still going down the traditional route.
When I was gaming, I thought to myself, if I was in South Carolina, so in Fortnite, ping is very important. It's the millisecond delay to get to the server. So all the best players were in Virginia, and I got invited to go live in Virginia in a gaming house and do that. But then I would have to leave school. So I ultimately decided, my mom made all these sacrifices for her entire life since she was 21 or 22 till, her 50s. She's been watching my brother, watching me, taking care of us. And her dream was to see me with a degree. And so I put more weight on that. So I was going to get the degree, which meant, okay, that means I can't be the best Fortnite player because I'm not going to be with the pros in the house at 0 ping in Virginia. So I was like, okay, if that's the case, then, what's next? Because, I'm not going to be a content creator for Fortnite. I wanted to compete. So I started posting on social media. Now that I was healthy, I was like, well, let's just start with fitness content. So I started doing 75 hard. I got 10,000 followers my first year. And that was my last year of college. And then, when I graduated, and I was basically taking this job to make sure I had money coming in. It was fully remote. I only had to work a couple hours a day, and I knew I could work on content and fitness and my actual goals while, having those paychecks come in. So it was more a means to an end. I never had any desire to do that. I didn't really have a huge desire to do college either, but it's just what you got to do sometimes to make sure you have some money coming in.
So it's fair to say when you got the sales job, you knew it wasn't going to be a 40 plus year thing. It was just until you made the content work, or? For
sure. And like once a year or twice a year, we would go into the office, and the office was in New York City. And I went in there and I talked with them about media and, things I was learning. And I wanted to try to make adjustments. And I was like, okay, maybe I can help this company grow. And, their media team was in their 50s. They weren't going to listen to me. So as soon as they didn't, and I had signed some of those deals, I just left. And I was like, all right, we're going to make this work. This is what we wanted. So yeah.
What was the decision behind posting 70-day hard and fitness content? What inspired you to be posting content?
I knew that at the time, I didn't know what UGC was or anything like that, but I knew, okay, if I post good social media content and I work really hard, I can make this a career. I've seen people do it. I am in good shape. I was in very good shape then, probably under 10% body fat, running marathons and lifting pretty heavy. It was like hybrid training. It was like 2022 when this was starting out. And my goal was to kind of be a fitness influencer, I suppose. But after my first year, I only had 10K followers. And I was like, I wonder if people want to see something different from me. So I had the brand deals and stuff, but then I started doing more talking head, telling stories about my life or giving opinions and hot takes and stuff like that, because I wasn't happy with the progress of 10K followers in a year, even though that gave me a very loyal, solid base of 10K followers that those brands liked. But I wanted to have more of the social proof that what I was doing was working, I guess. So that's when I started doing, a little bit more of the top of funnel mass content stuff. And TikTok had just came out with their creativity program beta, which was paying me personally $2 per 1,000 views for original content over a minute, which is really high. And so I had a couple months where I was doing 10 to 20K a month. And I was getting 20, 30 plus million views a month. I had some months, I think I did 50 or 60 million views on TikTok. How it works though is, the RPM, the revenue per 1,000 views, they would tailor it off. So, your first 100K views, you get that $2 CPM. It's nice. If you're at 1 million or 2 million, it'll go down to 30 to 50 cents. So they were, hedging their bets basically. But at the time, it was still really good money for me. And I knew, it wouldn't last forever. And that's when I was doing a lot of content, like probably 5 to 10 plus posts a day on TikTok. And I wanted to do the agency. I wanted to be more, run the actual content business instead of just being the creator forever.
Yeah, that makes sense. Walk us through that those early days when you were growing the following and you landed that first big brand deal. How did that feel?
I cried. That was one of the best days of my life. And, it's only $4K a month. I've had a lot better earning opportunities now, but it was just such a validation that someone saw what I was doing and was like, hey, we believe in you. We want to work with you. And it was Whoop, which was a company that I loved, that I'd been using for like 2 years. And I did a product review on my TikTok. They saw it. They liked how much I knew about the product, how I could talk about it. So that's when they DM me on Instagram. They're like, hey, we'd love to do a paid collaboration with you. What are your rates for videos? And I was like, I have no idea. I didn't even know if this email was real. I was like, yeah, like is this one of my friends messing with me, after I've tried so hard to make this happen? And I asked one of my friends, his name's Johnny Davies. He's like a Lululemon main athlete now. I texted him on TikTok. I was like, hey, I just got this email from Whoop. What do I say? He's like, just tell them you'll do one video for 500 or 4 videos for 1,500. So they get one off. So I sent that and they're like, that sounds great. What if we did UGC videos too? And they didn't say no or negotiate at all. And I knew they had just raised 100 million or whatever. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, for UGC, I had to look it up. I didn't know what it is. It's funny because now that's my entire career is like UGC platform for creators. But I said, okay, we'll do $1,000 for a UGC video, which at the time was just a paid ad, and they would get the rights to run it as a paid ad for forever. And it came out to about $3,750 a month for 5 videos a month. So like $750 per video on average. And I still didn't believe it. I did all the work with them. I signed the contract, everything. And then, a month later, after all the deliverables were done, they, sent me the money, and I couldn't believe it. It was actually peak. My mom and I cried. It was such a crazy thing to get paid for social media at the time for me. I didn't even know it was that possible without being like an influencer yet. So it changed my whole outlook, and I realized there's crazy opportunity here in a gig economy for a lot of people to do this. And it actually became even more than that when I started working with apps, because prior to that, it was only paid ad UGC. Now, when we talk about UGC, they're organic accounts that creators are getting $1,000 a month for posting every single day for one specific app. And they're brand new accounts. So you don't even have to be like a creator at all. It's a brand new thing. And that's why, we ended up building our tech too.
You mentioned it like kind of changed your whole mindset after getting that first brand deal with Whoop and seeing that you did a product review and they reached out to you. How did you go about getting other brand deals, or did you let them come to you?
Yeah, so they came to me, and I kind of did that for a little bit. After I left my job too, I went on Twitter and I was tweeting about UGC or something like that. And I saw this guy, Brian Blum, tweet out that he's looking for UGC creators to hire. And he was going to pay them like $4 to $5K a month. He runs an agency, a D2C agency called Nibble. And he actually sold it now. But Brian brought me on, and it was another like consistent $4 to $5K a month in revenue, which was awesome. So I did that. And, that's when I realized, I can kind of do outreach and just talk to these people too. So I hired a VA to send messages on Instagram to other brands. And then between all of that, I was doing pretty well. And again, being the creator and scaling that was time for money. So I didn't really want to do that. I was more so happy with that 10K per month, and then wanted to go to the next vehicle, which I thought was the agency.
Yeah, interesting. Let's go a little bit deeper into that then, that transition from being the creator, taking on deals, but trading your time for money, as opposed to scaling a business, helping other people, and ultimately making more money.
Yeah. Well, so at this time I was getting, tens of millions of views a month. I was dating this girl who was also an influencer. So we were doing like a little bit of couples content and stuff. We broke up. And prior to this point, like I was riding super high, like left the job, social media was working. I was gaining followers. People love my content. Like, people were reaching out to me, or people would see me and recognize me in person. And I was like, dude, I have so made it. But this girl and I, like, it wasn't a perfect fit. We only dated for like 6 months, but when we broke up, it was like kind of public because people were watching our stuff, and it really didn't go well. And I don't know if I was young or, incapable of I think it felt really personal to me because I thought people liked me, like for the content. But what I can see now is I'm just a person on the screen. They don't think like I'm like a real person. I'm just entertainment for them, right? And so I got destroyed. People were actually hating on me so strongly. And the miscalculation was, the girl I was dating, she had like 400, 500,000 followers, but which was more than me. I almost had like 100K at this time. And so all of her friends had like, the same or more. And so I had like a bunch of people kind of dumping on me. And it felt really personal. And that definitely made me make that transition from, you know what, I don't like this. This is not the best thing in the world. I did care, again, that's like the emotional thing we talked about earlier too. I do care what people think about me. I'm not like, completely logical. I think, I want to make a good impression. So that I asked my accountant at the time, and I was like, hey, I don't really know what I'm going to do here. Like, Whoop just pulled my deal. We had done, I think, like 12 or 13 months together at that point. And I didn't even want to make content really. I was too burnt out emotionally and just from doing it for like a year plus. And he's like, hey, I have a friend. His name's Ross. He runs a company called Honey Plus. I could see if, you could work with them. And I ended up bringing on like 5 influencers for them. They were posting TikTok shop videos. All those guys now are super successful. Those creators, I asked Ross for, I think it was like $2,500 to pay out these 5 creators for daily videos. And then they actually ran out of product. So we couldn't even continue posting. It was like a complete shit show for the first campaign I ever ran. But it did give me proof of concept that, okay, people do trust me in this space now. I have, enough going on and I can do this. And then I had another friend, Philip, founder of Minutes AI, which is an AI note-taking app. And he saw me on Twitter. He messaged me, hey, I saw you do UGC. I remember you from Fortnite. I remember your name. Do you have any creators? And so he sent me like their payment plan or what they pay creators. I started sending him creators and I just sent them my friends. And I realized like really quickly, like, oh, there's a huge demand for the apps because what they do is they'll have 10, 20, 50, the top apps have 500 plus creators posting every day. And I had nowhere near the supply to handle that. So I started like a training thing and getting creators in so that I could like sell the creators to the brand, basically like arbitrage that. That's when I, kind of fully transitioned to working more with the apps and trying to source creators for them.
I have 2 things off of that, which is super interesting. One, how had that breakup and getting all those hate comments changed as a person now? Like, do you care about hate comments and people's opinion nowadays, or?
Yeah. Dude, it's so weird. Part of me, because I still get them, obviously. Like, we probably do few million views a month still. I don't really post that much anymore. I more so use social media for like its original use, which is just like, this is my thing. Like, check it out or not. I don't really care. And I still will get hate comments. And I know mentally now I'm much better at recognizing them and then just like ignoring it. And then I completely forget about it in a couple minutes, like leaves the brain. But sometimes I'll see something and it's just such a softball. You know what I mean? It feels like I have to say something. I don't know if you guys ever played dodgeball and someone like throws the ball really high and you're like, I got it. You know what I mean? And then someone drills you with another thing. It's better to ignore it all, but sometimes it's kind of fun, and I've always liked to kind of debate and talk and communicate. So part of me falls for it and, says something back. But yeah, usually it doesn't hold any weight anymore like it used to when I was a little bit younger.
And it's good to stir up those comments, get the engagement higher. And then secondly, you've mentioned TikTok, Instagram, X. How important was it for your career to be posting on multiple different platforms, to be seen everywhere?
Very important. The most important thing, I guess, maybe wasn't the posting, but understanding which demographic is and what type of person is on each platform. As you guys know, X is where all the tech people are, smart people, people that like to read and consume a lot of information, they're on X. So if you're trying to market to an app founder, you want to be on X or YouTube long form so they can sit down and learn and watch and consume, because again, these people probably were in school, very intelligent, all of that. And then the difference between TikTok and Instagram, it was very hard for me to grow on Instagram originally. And it still kind of is, but the reality is if you want to grow on, it just depends on what type of content you're doing and who you're trying to go after. I think Instagram was better for me professionally as like, this is my Instagram. You know, you never really say like, this is my TikTok, because it's not as professional. It doesn't have the status. So once I got to like, 20, 30K followers on IG, I felt like, okay, I had enough status here that, I could get on calls and people would trust me more.
Very interesting. I'm curious, what's your hottest take with social media and UGC as well?
They're good questions. I haven't really thought about these. I feel like I'll give opinions. I have my co-founder, CJ Weber. A lot of times I'll just say something like that I fully believe in, and he's like, "Why do you believe that?" I'm like, "Isn't it obvious?" And he's like, "No." And I have to think about it for a second and be like, "Okay, so why do I believe that?" And then I get to the reasoning, and that's what this feels like. But I kind of speak strongly, I suppose, with my opinions.
No worries, no rush.
I don't know. Do you Okay, I have one, and it's what our tech is kind of predicated on. So the last few years, people have asked me religiously, like, please help me find creators. Please help me source them. I want to grow my app or my product or whatever. I need 1,000. I need 5. Someone called me yesterday asking for 5,000 creators. They're like, I don't care what it is. I'll pay you $1 million. I'm like, dude, I'm not doing it. I personally hate managing creators. I don't care what the number is.
Wow.
But that's the demand, is people want that, a creator manager. So what people think is, in order to get results with creators, you need to have someone actually managing them. And I was like, well, I know how to do it. The creators kind of know the systems, or the space is matured enough. The creators know what it is. They don't have to necessarily talk to me. So what I believe is that we can build a software that completely automates the creator manager process. So if you own an app, you go on our tech, you make your campaign, which our agent will help you build. And then the agent will go actually hire the creators, brief them, and have them start making the videos for you. And you don't have to do anything. You just say, this is my app, like, market it for me. So we call it like vibe marketing. That's what we built. So that's my hottest take, is you don't need to actually manage the creators anymore. They are good enough. Just find the best creators and incentivize them, and you'll be good.
Well, why would you? Why would you want to deal with some of that bullshit that they bring to the table?
Yeah, and this is the thing. Prior to our new CTO coming on, I was like, well, we still have to make sure that someone gets on the phone with creators. And he goes, why? And I was like, that's just the space. Like, you have to build the relationship. He goes, why? And I don't know if you guys ever work with like really smart people. He's a genius. And he asked me questions every day, like, why do we have this person? Like, why would we have to manage the creators? Can't we just automate all this? Like, that's why I'm here. And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. Honestly, so, but yeah.
I'm curious, what is your biggest pet peeve when you see creators get wrong about content creation in UGC?
Right. So UGC has incredible supply of creators, which means the payment schedules and payment plans will continue to drop. It'll just essentially be performance only for creators. Right now, you can get base pays plus performance. And that's, so a lot of creators come in and they're like, well, I want to make $1,000 every deal right now. And it's like, why? We can get someone else that's going to do pretty much the same thing. Again, doesn't matter how many followers you have or any of that stuff. And this is the going rate. We will find someone at this rate. If you want more, start with us or negotiate more performance and you'll be compensated fairly. So that's probably the thing that a lot of creators get wrong early on, is just overestimating their value. A good, easy rule of thumb would be, if you're an influencer and like you can pay an influencer basically a $5 CPM. So if they're averaging 100,000 views, you can pay them, $500 easily. Like that would be more the market rate to scale profitably for an app in terms of like our unit economics. So if you can pay someone $2 to $4, that's really good. That's what most people try to do in terms of the views and stuff for influencers. But that's only because they're averaging really high views. And again, so for organic UGC, you're basically just on a performance basis where it's like a flat $2 CPM per 1,000 views along those lines. And if you're good, you're just going to get paid. Like it's very simple, but that's what they get wrong.
Yeah, interesting. Look, Owen, we're approaching our time here. You've given us so much value. It's been so fun to dive into your story today and kind of learn about you and your journey along the way. And, we ask every guest one final question at the end of every episode. It's pretty simple, but it's, if you could leave one last thing with our audience, maybe advice, what would that be?
Trust your gut more, make more decisions based on your gut. Doesn't really matter what other people tell you in terms of what's best or what you think is best. It's okay. What is my gut telling me here? If you're feeling something and it feels off in any aspect of your life, you can change that today. You don't have to wait for other external circumstances. Just change it and make it happen.
That's amazing.
Amazing. Thank you, Owen, so much for coming on today. It was great to connect. Guys, whoever's listening still at this point, make sure you check Owen out. Links in the description below. Make sure you subscribe to the Real Leverage podcast as well. And thank you so much for listening. And thanks, Owen, for coming on.
Thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it.